Hello, souls and demons, and welcome back to the portal. Today's story is called Leaving Paveglia, written by getyaisha. So sit back, grip your seats, and enjoy this little story. My name is Justin Marshall. I'm one of those guys you see on YouTube exploring supposedly haunted places that have either been abandoned or are off limits to the public. Typically, I try to avoid places that have been covered multiple times, but for the last 2 years, I've been obsessed with a 48-hour survival-style shoot on Paveglia Island. For those of you that haven't heard of this place, I'll give you a quick history. Paveglia Island sits about half a mile off the coast of Venice, Italy. In 1379, most of the island's population abandoned it, fearing a war that was going on at the time. It stayed empty for close to 200 years until the bubonic plague hit in 1576. With the infection being incurable at the time, there wasn't enough room for all the sick and dying, so the island was converted into a quarantine zone. Eventually, there were so many bodies being shipped there that they ran out of room and started burning them. It was later discovered large numbers of the patients were burned alive to free up beds. So from the beginning, Paveglia had a horrible history, and when the plague resurfaced in the 1630s, it started all over again. There's a huge hole in the records. There's no other documentation of the place until the 1930s, when a doctor named Benito Altieri took over and the island had been repurposed as an insane asylum. Hundreds of patients lost their lives to this man. It's believed he was involved in some sort of occult activity, but there's no solid evidence one way or the other. Some people say that Altieri was trying to find a way to harness the human soul. He even claimed to have proof of its physical weight, 21.5 grams. It's the exact amount of weight lost by all his victims at the time of their deaths. Supposedly his findings drove him insane, and he committed suicide by jumping from the bell tower in the center of the island. After that, Paveglia was used one last time in the 60s as a geriatric center. When the staff and residents went missing, the place was closed for good. Today, it sits abandoned and travel is strictly prohibited. Over 100,000 people set foot on that island and never returned. And that's exactly why I had to go there. The crew would consist of Ryan, my cameraman, Matt, the sound engineer, and myself. The plan was simple. We'd pay someone to sneak us to the island and pick us up on the morning of the third day. Since the place is patrolled by police, we would have to set up camp near the center of the island to avoid getting spotted. Ryan would be recording everything, but we were all equipped with GoPro cameras for backup and POV shots. I'll spare you the details of booking the trip and the 6 hours it took to find someone willing to take us there. Let's just say the cops stopped us several times before we were able to get on shore. As the island came into view, I could see a bell tower looming high above the trees. We were all excited. You could feel it in the air. As we pulled up to the docks, we got our first glimpse of the asylum housing unit. The bushes and weeds stood a good 7 feet tall, shrouding most of the windows and doors of the first floor. Once we were unloaded, the boat took off and we started filming. It wasn't long before we found a way through the security fencing and made our way inside. The first doorway led us to a dilapidated hall that was covered in graffiti. There were doors on either side of the hall and a stairwell at the very end of the corridor. The door on the right was blocked by piles of old furniture and huge chunks of rocks, so we went left. Room for room, we explored the first floor of the housing area until we found what we believed was the kitchen. At the far end of the room was an old white-tiled fireplace. As we got closer, we noticed a huge section of the wall had been broken out, leading to an amazing courtyard. Things didn't really pick up until we entered the third building, which was the prison. Almost instantly, we started hearing voices and movement from the floors above us. But when we went to check, there was no one there. Over the next few hours, we started catching glimpses of shadowy figures and even managed to get a few on camera. Once the sun started to set, we all agreed it was time to set up camp and get ready for the night shoot. We decided to make camp between the insane asylum and the hospital. Since there's no electricity on the island, we could only explore the buildings during the day, but that gave us the perfect chance to check out the plague fields. the bridge, and the burning grounds, which are supposedly the most haunted areas of the island. Once we had our camp set up, we had a bite to eat, put fresh batteries in all the cameras, and headed out for the plague fields. From our camp, we could almost see them. If it weren't for the overgrowth, we would have a clear view. As we walked through the darkness, we started spotting dim lights moving through the field. At first, we thought it was the cops or maybe some teenagers coming on shore to do some more tagging. Either way, we held up and tried to wait them out. We stood there for a few minutes till the lights vanished. I couldn't tell which way they had gone, but it didn't matter. We pushed on and were at the edge of the field in no time. As we came out of the brush, the first thing I noticed was the ground. Nothing was growing there. Random piles of animal bones littered the area and the smell was horrible. I turned to face the camera and did my usual brief history of the area. I was almost done when Matt interrupted me. "Dude, there's something moving over there." He pointed over my shoulder towards the center of the field. Ryan automatically took the camera off of me and aimed it to where he was pointing. I turned to get a look and my jaw dropped. There was a dark figure crossing the field. As I tried to focus my eyes on it, there was a flash of dim blue light and it was gone. "Oh my God, Ryan, did you get that? Please tell me you got that." I glanced over to see Ryan just as he gave me the thumbs up. "Yeah, I got it. I don't know if you guys are seeing what I'm seeing, but there's more of them moving out there." I couldn't see anything, but I could hear a low humming sound. "Hey Matt, are you picking up that sound?" He tapped on his headset and shook his head. "No, all I'm getting is static. What does it sound like?" A chill ran up my spine and a voice whispered in my ear. "Non dovreste essere qui." My Italian isn't the best, but that meant, "You shouldn't be here." My body went numb. Did anyone else hear that? They both looked at me like I was crazy and shook their heads. I decided to keep it to myself and push on. The instant we stepped foot on the plague fields, I started feeling sick to my stomach and my body got weak. I took a deep breath and picked up my pace, but by the time we made it to the center of the field, I could tell we were all feeling it. Matt called out, "I'm getting serious feedback over here," then started puking his guts out. I got lightheaded and nearly collapsed. I had to sit on the ground to keep from falling down. Ryan, on the other hand, seemed to be the only one not affected by whatever was going on. "What the hell is wrong with you two? I told you..." Something cut him off. I didn't see it, but something snatched him from behind and made him drop the camera as he slammed to the ground. What the fuck was that? He scrambled back to his feet and tried to grab the camera, only to get hit from behind and drop face down in the dirt. I managed to stand up, but Matt was down on his hands and knees, dry heaving and drooling into a pool of regurgitated chili and bile. I nearly threw up just looking at it, but I fought the urge and helped Ryan off the ground. "You okay, man? This place is intense. I think we should move on to the bridge. This is amazing." Ryan dusted himself off and checked his equipment. By then, Matt had stopped heaving and was rinsing his mouth out with water. He spat and looked over at the two of us and shook his head. "Am I the only one here who thinks we should go back to camp?" After a quick equipment check, we headed for the bridge. On the way there, things got worse. We saw glowing eyes watching us from the windows of the asylum and heard blood-curdling screams that seemed to float on the breeze. Shadow figures rushed at us only to vanish in a flash of pale blue light, and we had it all on film. As the bridge came into view, I started to smell smoke. The odor was like burning hair and rotten meat. The closer we got, the worse it became until it was so thick in the air, it felt like it was settling on your skin. The bridge crosses over a canal that separates the main island from the burning fields. I couldn't imagine how many people crossed it, knowing they were never coming back. Ryan stopped to get a wide shot of the bridge and the field. Guys, there's someone standing on the bridge." Matt and I both tried to spot what he was seeing, but there was nothing there. "What do they look like?" As I finished the question, Ryan blurted out, "Holy shit, run!" and took off, vanishing into the tree line. Scrambling to keep up, Matt and I ran, trying not to lose sight of him as he cut through the brush. By the time I caught up to him, we were back at our camp. He dug through his equipment bag, grabbed the radio and tried to contact the boat. There was no response. We can't stay here. We have to get off this island right now. Over the years, the three of us had been through a lot of crazy situations, and in all that time I had never seen Ryan get truly scared. Calm down, what happened? What did you see back there? Ryan stood there clutching the radio, scanning the darkness around us. I don't know what they were. They were tall and thin, with long beaks and big round eyes. They were coming across the bridge, pointing at us. Didn't you see them? Matt and I looked at each other, shaking our heads. No, all we saw was you running like a crazy person. There was nothing there. He looked at the both of us in disbelief, then stepped over and picked up the camera. Putting it into playback mode, he handed it over. See for yourself. What I saw in the footage was horrifying. Plague doctors, one of them wearing a white mask, was standing in the center of the bridge pointing at us as dozens more came spilling across. I checked the footage one more time before handing the camera to Matt. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps crunching through the leaves echoed around us. A cold blast of wind howled through the trees and the fire flickered out. We ran. The old hospital was the closest building, and while it may not have been my first choice, anything was better than waiting for those things to catch us. We ran until we found an opening and ducked inside, then found a place to hide. We sat there in the dark, breathing heavy, listening to those creatures race through the ruins looking for us. After what felt like forever, it finally got quiet. What are we gonna do? I'm not leaving this spot till the sun comes up. Then I'm getting the fuck out of here. I don't care if I have to swim to the mainland, I'm getting off this island. I could tell by the sound of his voice Matt wasn't joking. Ryan, on the other hand, hadn't said a word since we got inside. Ryan, you okay over there, bro? Talk to me, man. What do you think we should do? There was a long pause. Then I heard something that completely caught me off guard. Snoring. I dug in my pocket and pulled out my mini flashlight. Clicked it on, then aimed the beam towards the sound. Ryan was slumped over in the corner, asleep. What the fuck? The sound of Matt collapsing cut me off. I spun around to face him and, as I did, I locked eyes with a nurse dressed in all white and froze. She raised a finger to her lips and shushed me. My eyelids suddenly became so heavy I could barely keep them open. I stumbled back and dropped to my knees before flopping face first onto the dust-covered floor. I woke up to screaming, "Help! Somebody help me!" It took me a second to come to my senses and get to my feet. I staggered out into the hall. I couldn't tell who was screaming, but Ryan and Matt were both missing. The screams echoed through the building, making it hard to figure out where they were coming from. I wandered around in the dark. The only light was coming from the moon, and my head was pounding. That cold chill ran up my spine and stopped me in my tracks. "Viens par te," the voice whispered in my ear. "He's coming for you." I mouthed the words under my breath as my heart jumped up into my throat. I ran in the direction I thought the screams were coming from, and ended up at the bottom of a crumbling stairway. The screaming was definitely louder here. It had to be coming from upstairs. The first few steps were easy, but the higher I went, the darker it got, and soon I couldn't see at all. I tried to stay as close to the wall as possible, but about halfway to the second floor, I stepped into a gap and went crashing back to the first floor. I landed with a hard smack and had the wind knocked out of me. I lay there gasping for air, listening to the screams. Before I could get myself together, something grabbed me by the ankles and dragged me through a hole in the wall out into the woods. Dark shadows swirled around me, and the wind howled so loud I couldn't think straight. Then suddenly, everything stopped. The shadows became those figures from the bridge, and the ground under me started to vibrate, giving off a low hum. I tried to get up, but those things pinned me down. The ground near my feet protruded as a pair of hands emerged from the dirt, bracing against the ground as a large figure pulled itself up from the depths. A bone-white face stared down at me through huge black eyes. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I struggled till my muscles ached and burned, but there was no breaking free. The figure standing at my feet tore away my shirt and placed its hands on my chest. My body went cold from its touch. It felt like all the energy was being drained out of me. I thought I was going to die. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a voice yelling out my name, and suddenly the creatures vanished. Ryan came running over to where I was, laying in the dirt. "What the hell are you doing? Get up, we have to find Matt." I saw him running towards the church. "Come on, man, let's go." I clasped my hands over my chest to find my clothes weren't torn at all. I rubbed my eyes and realized I was still wearing my GoPro camera. I couldn't help but smile. Once all this footage was edited, we were going to be famous. Ryan helped me up and gave me a strange look. "Bro, what are you smiling for? This is fucked up. We have to get out of here." I laughed and then I tapped the camera. "We've got it all recorded. We did it." He shook his head. "You're an idiot. Can we please go find Matt before he ends up hurting himself?" The church wasn't far. The bell tower stood out against the night sky like a beacon. The closer we got to it, the more I realized we were going dangerously close to the burning grounds. As the building came into view, that horrible smell of burning flesh filled my lungs, nearly taking my breath away. A flickering orange glow could be seen moving through the second floor. It had to be Matt. He must have made himself a torch. But why was he on the second floor and where was he going? It took a few minutes to find a way inside, but once we did, we wished we hadn't. An overwhelming stench filled the air and it was pitch black. We stepped back out and put together torches of our own before going back inside. The dim light from our torches revealed the source of that horrid smell. Decaying bodies, stacked nearly to the ceiling, dripping melted flesh into maggot-filled pools that coated the floor. We sloshed through the writhing pools of muck until we came to a stairwell. By the time we made it to the second floor, we were both puking and gasping for air. The second floor was a nightmare. The walls seemed to be made of flesh. Arms and legs stuck out at odd and impossible angles. The further we went, the worse it got. Laughter reverberated through the building as the limbs came to life. Matt's voice called out from somewhere in the darkness above us. "I can see the light." We tried yelling to him, but there was no answer. As impossible as it sounds, by the time we were halfway across the second floor, we were wading through waist-deep pools of partially congealed blood. Before we could find the next stairwell, my torch had gone out and Ryan's was barely holding on. Climbing up to the third floor, I was expecting more horrors, but what was waiting was far worse than I could have imagined. The walls of the halls were made up of thousands of faces, stitched together by barbed wire. Their eyelids had all been removed, revealing clouded over eyes that silently watched us moving through this hell. Our feet crunched up against the floor. At first I thought it might have been gravel, so I reached down and scooped up a handful and brought it up to the light. Teeth. Millions of them. We were walking on teeth. If there would have been anything left in my stomach, I would have thrown up again. I dropped them, and we pushed on, calling out to Matt as we went. About a quarter of the way through, we saw him standing at the end of the corridor staring at us. Blood was dripping from his eyes as he tore out fistfuls of his own hair while screaming, "I can see the light." The closer we got, I realized his eyes weren't just bleeding. His eyelids were gone. "Matt, come on, man, we have to get you some help. You're hurt pretty bad, buddy. Come with us and let's get you to a doctor." Ryan was trying to stay calm while he was talking, but Matt wasn't listening. "The light is the life. The light is the life." He screamed and laughed maniacally, then turned and ran off into the darkness. We chased him for a while, eventually catching him up in the bell tower. Climbing the rusted ladder higher and higher, he kept laughing and screaming about the light. When we reached the top, we found him staring out over the burning ground, standing on the edge. I tried to reason with him, but God knows I tried, but he just smiled and said, "Now I see it." Then he jumped. We sat there in the bell tower until the sun came up. The police found Matt's body and eventually located us still sitting in the bell tower, too horrified to try and climb back down. We were arrested and sent back to the States to stand trial for Matt's murder. Ryan was found unfit to stand trial and committed to an insane asylum. I was convicted and sentenced to 25 years. The confiscated footage somehow vanished from the evidence vault, only to resurface online a year later. Since then, people from all over the world have been writing me. I have been interviewed a couple of times, and even offered a movie deal. Looks like I'm going to be famous after all.